Hello and welcome to Steve and Dave's Behind the Curtain. This is our series where we talk about the unsung heroes of the music industry who made the pop stars and the rock stars look good. And that's the writers, producers, the studio, session players.
Right.
And this week we're talking about Burt Bacharach and Hal David. Just a powerhouse of a songwriting team, and we're going to be taking a look at their collaboration, essentially through the '60s, and just a little bit on either side of that.
That's right. A lot has been written and spoken about both Bacharach and David. They are arguably the most storied songwriting team in American pop music history. It's they're amazing. Their output is extraordinary. But what's fascinating about their journey is that there is a real kind of creative evolution from the late 50s into the late 60s, early 70s. And we're going to sort of chart that out. We're going to take a look at a number of songs and give everyone, I think, a real sense of how they grew as a creative partnership.
And while we're doing this, you'll want to be sure to check out our playlist, which has all the songs that we're going to be talking about. So if something doesn't just pop into your head automatically, well, what's that? Just check out the playlist, listen to it. You'll know what we're talking about. So let's continue without further ado. We're going to try to take this a little bit chronologically, year for year. And as Steve suggested, take a look at the development of the songwriting team.
Right.
The first recorded collaboration was by Sherry Parson. It was the B-side to her song, to her single "I'm Sorry for Someone," released in June 1956. The song was called "Peggy's in the Pantry," and it's kind of a strange lyric. Peggy is a femme fatale, a teenage femme fatale. The lyrics are, Peggy's in the pantry, so are all the boys. Peggy's in the pantry, can't you hear the noise? Bet she isn't picking on a chicken bone. Peggy, 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 leave my guy alone. What a perfect party, all the boys in town, till that Peggy walked in with a strapless gown. If the boy who brought me doesn't take me home, gonna pull her hair out, gonna scratch her eyes out. Oh, Peggy, 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 leave my guy alone. So,
yeah.
Well, fairly clear.
Yeah, I think it's fairly clear. At this point, Bacharach and David are working out of the Brill building, and really the most famous setting for American songwriters. The Brill building in New York City was a multi-story structure where record publishing companies had offices. Publishing companies, big and small, had their offices. And on every floor then, in addition to the publishing companies, there were writers. There were composers and lyricists, oftentimes working in small cubicles. And David and Bacharach were, quite frankly, sort of slaving away in the Brill building, working on a number of songs really each week.
Yeah. And at this point, they're both also working with other people, right?
That's right.
So Hal David's working with other composers, Bacharach's working with other lyricists. And that's going to go on for a while yet.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
They continue coming back together to write songs. And 1957 already sees their first #1 hit. It's #1 in the country charts. It's The Story of My Life. Made it to the Billboard Pop #15. So it's top 20 hit as well in the pop charts. And this is by Marty Robbins. By the way, it's his 6th country #1 hit and third pop hit in the top 20. So he was doing pretty well back in the time. They picked a good vocalist. I'd like to read a little passage from this book, Burt Bacharach, Song by Song. It's by Serene Dominic, and it's brilliant. It's humorous and informative, and I can't recommend it enough for anyone who's really interested in the Bacharach opus. So about the story of my life, he says, here Robbins' romantic yet selective memory recounts the only significant events of his life, beginning and ending with his true love and omitting all that messy birth, school, work, and death stuff in between. The only hint of turmoil occurs in the bridge, when the happy couple actually break up, only to make up in the next line so that they can marry, and this likable galoot's story can indeed end happily ever after. 3 years later, Bacharach and David would be fashioning mostly tortured life stories where the book of love or life is irrevocably shut tight whenever a lover leaves. Without your love, I would die is a popular sentiment found in many Hal David lyrics. But for now, the girl returns, the whistlers reign supreme, the fluff gets up your nose. Meanwhile, back in the UK, the record buying company continued in its peculiar practice of bypassing the original American version whenever confronted with inferior British sound-alike covers. Liverpudlian Michael Holliday reached #1 with his retelling of The Story of My Life, while shaky-voiced Gary Miller also made the top 20 with a slightly more eccentric production featuring background vocals emulating castanets.
Well,
okay.
There you go. So a couple things about, so it's Story of My Life, sung by Marty Robbins. Marty Robbins was a country singer of some fame, as Dave, as you're suggesting. He had already had quite a bit of chart success. And it was also on Columbia, the Columbia label. And this particular song was produced, as were many songs at Columbia, by Mitch Miller. Mitch Miller was in the late 1950s, was arguably the most powerful man in popular music. In addition to his work at Columbia, he headed the Columbia label. He produced many of the songs. He also had a very popular television show, Sing Along with Mitch. He had the so-called Mitch Miller Singers, great kind of grand choir. And one of the things that made the Sing Along with Mitch interesting was that they had the lyrics of particular kind of pop standards on the screen, and there would be kind of a bouncing ball. And so you could sing along with Mitch. And so it was a wildly popular show. Mitch Miller also hosted a weekly radio interview show on CBS. He was a very big figure, but he hated rock and roll. He detested it. He thought it was an abomination, and he thought it was at best a kind of flash in the pan. And so in an odd sort of way, with his relationship with Columbia Records, Columbia kind of got off to a slow start. This was the era of rock and roll, late 50s, right? But Columbia wouldn't sign pop artists, rock artists. And it was really only after Mitch Miller was forced out of Columbia that Columbia got into the game in a real way. Of course, Columbia, became famous for their stable of performers, including, I guess, one Bob Dylan. But Mitch, and the other thing, real quickly, Mitch
that
loved.
Was basically Clive Davis, right?
That's right. Now, that's
started that out.
Mitch loved whistling, and so many of the songs that Mitch produced, whistling somehow made their way into the record, and Story of My Life is no exception. Say what you will about Miller and his sort of kind of middle of the road taste. He was a very successful music producer, and he had a kind of ear for a hit. And so while there wasn't, Bacharach in particular doesn't have a lot to, loving things to say about Mitch Miller. He did appreciate the fact that Miller sort of understood sort of the hit making business. And early in their career, Davis and Bacharach needed hits, and Mitch Miller helped deliver one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one other thing that they had in common was that Bacharach also wasn't a big fan of rock and roll.
That's right.
And never really became a fan of rock and roll, right?
It's very true.
So he jazz was more his thing,
Yes.
and what has become known as the adult contemporary
that's
feeling.
that's absolutely right. It seems as though that Bacharach had exposure to jazz as a young person, and when he went to college in Montreal, he didn't spend much time in class, but he did spend a lot of time in the jazz clubs of Montreal. And his earliest jobs as an accompanist and a band leader oftentimes were with sort of standard pop or jazz groups. And so you're right, he never really embraced rock and roll in any kind of meaningful way. Unusual for the time.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're going to take a look at what was one of the first movie tie-ins. It was a so-called exploitation song because it wasn't in the movie, but it was about the movie, had the same title. And Jerry Lewis, who acted in the movie, also sang. It's Sad Sack. And this was a year after Lewis and Martin had broken up as a comedy team. And it must have really gotten Martin's goat, because in that year, 1956, Jerry Lewis had a number 3 song on the pop charts.
Yep.
It was a number 3 album.
That's right.
Jerry Lewis Sings.
That's right. Yep.
And one of his songs also made it into the top 10. It was incredible, and it was several years before Dean Martin had that kind of singing success, or that kind of success with his singing career. Incredible.
Well,
but
part of the reason,
this song,
oh my God,
his chart wasn't covered. Was just, it wasn't good, but it was one of the first forays into movie songs, like with The Blob, with Steve McQueen.
Yes.
They had songs from that, and a year later they'll have another one with The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
That's right. They hitched their wagon early to film work, and it soon proved to be not only lucrative, but I think also artistically, meaningful.
They rose and fell with that to a large extent. Really shaped their careers.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. You all can track this down on the playlist. This is I think this is a horrible performance. Jerry Lewis it's just shocking, actually, how bad it is. And the song isn't much, but the vocal performance is just atrocious. I mean, I think it speaks to the larger question, the mystery that surrounds Jerry Lewis. I think, Dave, you and I share an opinion that we never really understood the appeal of Jerry Lewis. That
maybe the most overrated comedian in history.
I think that's yes. I think that's right. That's certainly where I'm at with that. And again, as you note, the great irony is that it's Jerry Lewis, not Dean Martin. It's Jerry Lewis who leaps out in front in terms of a kind of recording career. It's just like, it's unbelievable. But so it's worth a listen, a short listen. It's a painful listen, but listen to it on our playlist.
But one thing that's typical about this song is that Hal David watches the movie and basically transcribes what he's seen.
That's right.
That becomes the lyrics, right?
That's right.
So that's very typical of at least these exploitation songs that come up. It happens again and again. Okay, last hit from 1957, "Magic Moments" by Perry Como, which was actually the B-side to "Catch a Falling Star." It was released January 1958, and hit number 4 in the Billboard pop charts, and number 1 in England. Interestingly enough, it bumped Michael Holliday's cover of "The Story of My Life."
That's something, yeah.
Giving Bacharach and David the top 2 slots in the British hit parade for most of March 1958.
It's Perry Como was an enormous figure in popular music for a number of decades, and he was known as a kind of a crooner's crooner. He had a very distinctive style, very smooth, very effortless, and this for Como was, it was a big song, a really big song. It became really one of his signature pieces. It is, however, one of the more curious lyrics of Hal David's career, where he writes about pushing the clutch to the floorboard and various kinds of things. It's kind of a curious and not kind of awkward lyric. Again, feel free to listen to it on the playlist. But it was a big song, and Perry Como was a big singer. And I don't think there's any question up to this point, he was the biggest singer that they had any success with.
Yeah. All right. So we're cherry picking here because David and Bacharach were prolific,
Yes.
writing dozens, if not hundreds of songs over their career. And so they were constantly being included on singles, often as a B-side, sometimes with some moderate success in the pop charts. But we're going to skip from 1957 to 1962.
Yeah.
This is the year where an essential combination comes together. For one thing, a young woman cuts a single for the Shirelles song, It's Love That Really Counts. Cuts a demo for Burt Bacharach. It's Love That Really Counts. And they play it for Florence Greenberg, who is the owner of Spectre Records. And she says, "Oh, I hate the song, but who's the girl?"
Yeah.
And the girl was Dionne Warwick.
Right.
And although they did not release her demo of that song, it was actually released by the Shirelles then. But this was when Florence Greenberg, Spectre Records, and above all, Bacharach and David became aware of Dionne Warwick, and that made all the difference.
Yeah, she was extraordinarily important to their career. And obviously they were extraordinarily important to her career. She had that certain something. Bacharach talks about how impressed he was with her, not only her vocal abilities, but her musical sense. She was trained. She had some formal training, some formal music training, and she was a very, very accomplished singer at a very young age. When they first sort of came together, she was a kid. She was still in, I think, her late teens.
Ponytails and tennis shoes.
Quite remarkable. Warwick describes singing the Bacharach and David numbers oftentimes as almost like an exam, that they would present her with new material that would push her in various kinds of ways. And so it was, it was a very, very powerful relationship. This kind of trio, in many ways, helps to sort of define pop music in the 1960s. They are, in an odd sort of way, kind of inseparable for a number of years. And it starts, when she was just a kid, as you described it.
Well, and Burt Bacharach composes some very idiosyncratic types of things, right?
Yes.
His phrasing and his tempo changes are highly unusual. Right. And if you're able to come in there and read this sheet music and be able to sing it, that's right, anywhere close to what he imagines, it's impressive. And she was able to do that. Yes. So that was one of the things that caught their attention. She was originally part of a group called the Gospel Airs, which included Cissy Houston, who was her aunt, her sister Dee Dee Warwick, Myrna Smith, and they were the backup for the Shirelles. And so that's how they got into the Spectre environment and started to make the contacts that were so important. But we're going to back up just a little bit
Yeah.
because the first hit that they had was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
This is
Are you familiar with the story?
not, I guess not. No, I don't think that. No,
All right.
no.
Well, this was released in April 1962, and by Gene Pitney. And
Yes.
Gene Pitney was in the studio recording this, and they said, "Hey, wasn't this supposed to be for the Man Who Shot Liberty Valance soundtrack?" And Gene Pitney says, "It is." He said, "Well, it's already playing across the street." They said, "Oh, that can't be right." Walks out. There it is. The cinema across the street is playing The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. They released the song after the movie was released. It did not get into the movie. It's said that I think John Ford
Yes, that's right, John Ford.
didn't care for it, and so it was released parallel, and both the song and the movie did extremely well.
Yes.
But it was not part of the soundtrack.
So
that's
no,
that.
it would. Yeah, I mean, just real quickly, I mean, John Ford was a Western director of some note, a grizzled by this point, right? Early 60s, a grizzled
Right.
veteran of many Westerns. He was directing Westerns in the silent era. You listen to this, there's no way this song would have appeared in a John Ford film. There's just no way in hell that this would have. And so, yeah, not a surprise that it wasn't included, but the notion of sort of a kind of parallel track is a very interesting one. It's a little confusing if you sort of kind of try to figure out what, what's going on, and you watch the film, where does the Pitney song come in? It's not going to be there, but it's yeah.
But if you listen to the song,
number.
you listen to the song on the radio, you know what you're going to get when you go to see the movie, because it again, it's another one of these songs where Hal David just basically puts it out there. This is what the movie's about.
No, that's exactly right. No, it's exactly, it really is a kind of synopsis of the film. I mean, yes, it's 2 minutes and 49 seconds, and that's all you need to know about the film. Apparently didn't hurt the box office any, but
No,
I mean, it tells you all you need to know, or what you're going to see at least. It also, yeah, go ahead.
No, go.
Well, just Gene Pitney was a pop singer of some note by this point. They have some success with Pitney. Interestingly,
Yes.
Pitney's delivery is unusual. He seems he doesn't seem like a person who would gravitate toward the work of Bacharach and David. But for whatever reason, the songs that Pitney sang of theirs really worked. But I confess this, and again, if you're unfamiliar with the song, check it out on the playlist. I find this kind of an odd song. I've always thought that this was kind of an odd song. It reads, or it sounds more like a kind of synopsis, kind of overblown, overwrought synopsis of a Western film than it does even a pop song. It's just peculiar, but wildly successful.
Yeah, and this peaked at number 4 on Billboard charts. But they're going to have another hit with Gene Pitney in this year, 1962. But before we get to that, let's talk about "Make It Easy on Yourself."
Yeah,
right, because this song is relevant in a number of different ways. Steve, you know a little bit about this, right?
Yeah.
What's the significance? I mean, it was sung by Jerry Butler. They got
Jerry Butler. I mean, Jerry Butler was an African American singer who had a number of hits. Very soulful delivery. Again, Bacharach and David are having tremendous success with the variety of singers. I mean, there is not much that links Marty Robbins and Jerry Butler. and Gene Pitney. I mean, it's just like,
right.
What? But what's interesting about the song is that it works for Jerry Butler and it works for some other artists as well. But I mean, you should probably talk about the song itself, though.
Well, uh, it's interesting in terms of the history of the Bacharach David Warwick core, because they had originally promised the song to Dionne Warwick. This was going to,
Yes.
she liked it, she heard it, she liked it,
Right.
she wanted to sing it. They said, all right, this is for you, baby. And then
Yeah.
what ended up happening is that the Florence Greenberg hated the song. So she didn't want Spectre Records to do it. And so they had to go to BJ Records. And Dionne had no contract with BJ, you know.
That's right.
So
That's right.
So they had to go with one of their singers. Interesting part about this is that Calvin Carter, the A&R rep at BJ, let Bacharach do not only the orchestration, but essentially the production of this single. And this was, this opened all sorts of new vistas for Bacharach. He really, it became clear to him, a perfectionist, was never happy with the way other people did his songs.
Right.
And now he gets to be a hands-on guy and micromanage and get it just like they want it, like he wants it, you know. So,
I think
story related.
Yeah, go ahead.
Burt Bacharach comes into the studio one day with just this incredible fox on his arm, suntanned in a clingy orange dress, and just Jerry Butler's eyes just popping out of his head. And at some point, Calvin Carter has to say, "Hey, Jerry, keep your mind on the song, man." Jerry Butler relates that, and he mistook the woman that was there for Angie Dickinson, but it wasn't. It was one of it was actually too early. Angie Dickinson wasn't on the scene yet with Bacharach, but it was one of his earlier girlfriends, Slim Brandy.
It's you know, this is a big moment, as you're suggesting, in Bacharach's career. As you also noted, he hated the production of many of the singles. And he talks about how he went into production and got involved in a very hands-on way, almost out of kind of to protect his songs, protect their songs, right? Almost because he was so disgusted with how their work was being butchered. And it really then becomes, Dave, as you're noting here, a very much a kind of trademark of Bacharach to be involved, have his fingerprints on almost every aspect of the production. And it's and sometimes, frankly, to his personal detriment. But this is a very important moment in Bacharach's career. It changes the trajectory of what he does and how he does it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The next hit that they had that year, released in September, made it to the Billboard #2, and it was another Gene Pitney song. Yeah. Only Love Can Break Your Heart. And then we come to Don't Make Me Over. This was the first Dionne Warwick single then, released in October 1962. And it made a modest number 21 on the Billboard. Yeah. Didn't quite break the top 20, but as first single in the top 40, what the heck? You know, can't complain about that.
No, I can't complain about it. And I think it's fair to say that this single has the admiration for it has never, if anything, it's become a more important song. And it really, I think, right, it suggests a kind of transition in the David, in Hal David's lyrics, and to some degree how Bacharach and David were integrating their work. This is a sophisticated song, right? This is, I think, this is sort of the first kind of classic Bacharach David number, right? That, oh yeah, I mean, it has that definable sound, the tone of the lyrics. There's just something about it that's like immediately identifiable. And while, again, as you're suggesting, not a major hit at the time, this is, I think, perceived as a very significant song for Bacharach and David, and certainly a very big song for Warwick.
Well, and there's kind of an apocryphal story that goes along with this. And Dionne Warwick was really, really upset that they gave the song that they had promised her, Make It Easy on Yourself, to Jerry Butler, had him sing it. She didn't get a chance to do it. And they said, oh, well, don't get upset. Other songs will come. We're going to be writing a song especially for you. Just hang on. And she said, kind of miffed, don't make me over, man. Which I guess in the lingo of the day meant, don't bullshit me. But then they made that comment, don't make me over, to the title of her first song. So it's interesting. Florence Greenberg cried when she heard this song for the first time. And she didn't cry because she loved it so much. She cried because she hated it. She thought it was awful. But it started getting airplay, and she learned to love it with time, but she was not a fan at the beginning.
It's again, if you're unfamiliar with the song, take a listen to it on the playlist. But it's very unique sounding. I mean, it is, when you think about the kinds of pop songs that are sort of being churned out in the early 1960s, this sounds nothing like those, right? And the lyrics are nothing like the kind of standard kind of pop ballad or pop tune of the early 1960s, whether it's from Britain or it's from the United States. There is something very sophisticated about this, and complicated. And it just, there's a unique sound. And so, yes, I mean, you could understand on some level why she's upset, because it just didn't sound like a pop record. But people were intrigued.
But 1962, this record, it was the beginning of something huge in pop.
Yes.
The Bacharach David Warwick.
That's right.
Combination that was so symbiotic.
Absolutely.
That they helped each other's careers immensely. All right, moving on to 1963. We have Blue on Blue by Bobby Vinton. It was released in May 1963. And it hit number 3 on the Billboard chart. Vinton asked Bacharach for something. He had a hit with Roses Are Red.
Yes.
That was a number 1 hit for Bobby Vinton. And then just a long time, a string of singles that didn't go anywhere. So he went back to a song about colors, and he originally tried to get some publishing rights for this song. If he was going to do it, he wanted some publishing rights. And Bacharach just took the sheet music and walked out of his office. And Bobby Vinton came running after him. Hey, man, that's just, I can't kid you. Let's just do this. It's a wonderful song. So he bluffed. Bacharach called his bluff, and he ended up doing the song anyway.
It very much is. I mean, Bobby Vinton built his career on a couple of songs, and this is clearly one of them. But what's, again, sort of interesting about this, I mean, there's nothing really all that interesting about Blue on Blue, but it's from the same songwriting team that had delivered Don't Make Me Over. I mean, this is the thing, is that they understood the popular music game, and they understood how to deliver a song that would sell. Now, they also understood how to create a song that of deeper meaning, and something that was really, I think, important artistically. But they never lost sight of the kind of the commercial aspect of popular music, and so they could, they could churn them out. And Blue on Blue, I think, is an example of that.
Oh, absolutely. The reason I included this is because this is a song that both Bacharach and David point to when they talk about this was the song that sealed the marriage. From this point on, we wrote exclusively with each other. And that went on to 1973, I guess. Right. So 10 years of an exclusive songwriting team. And clearly that was a strength for that, for that team.
For sure.
The next song, Close to You.
Yeah.
They Long to Be Close to You. A huge hit, like 7 years later.
Yes.
But at the beginning, it was sung by Richard Chamberlain, Steve, who was Richard Chamberlain?
Young
Not a
doctor.
singer that we
Yeah, it's young Dr. Kildare.
Young Dr. Kildare.
Richard Chamberlain was an actor of some renown, kind of the hot new thing in Hollywood.
Kind
He
of
was also
heartthrob, right?
Yeah, heartthrob, a television heartthrob. Television was just becoming important, and he had, frankly, some success as a pop singer in the early 1960s. And so, curiously, one of the most important, or at least one of the most recognizable songs of the late 20th century, was first put on the charts by this guy, Richard Chamberlain.
Oh,
but
no.
Not on charts.
It didn't chart.
Are you certain it didn't chart?
No, it was.
It cracked that. It cracked the Hot 100.
I don't think so. No.
Oh well then. Yeah, I thought it did. Well then.
No, it really didn't do anything. And by all accounts, Richard Chamberlain was not a good singer. He was a heartthrob, and so they knew his picture on 45s would sell records, but it wasn't enough.
But you're suggesting that a few years later something happened. I don't.
Yes,
something happened to this record.
Herb Albert approached Bacharach and David and said, I want one of your songs to follow up on this guy. This guy's in love with you, which we'll talk about later. Do you have anything laying around that deserves another look? So they showed him this, and he decided he didn't want to do it, but he also decided that it was probably perfect for one of his acts at A&M Records.
Yeah, that's right.
The Carpenters. And the Carpenters were an extremely talented young brother and sister team that were not producing any hits for A&M. They were the no-hit wonders there, just like the Supremes were at Motown for a while.
Yeah.
But he believed in them and he kept supporting them, and he brought them this song. And strangely enough, Richard Carpenter redid the arrangement. This is what Burt Bacharach is known for, is his arrangements, right? But Richard Carpenter rearranged it, and high praise. Burt Bacharach said afterwards, "Oh, it was exactly right. He did exactly what needed to be done for that song." So in 1970, it was the first number one hit. Well, the first hit for the Carpenters, period.
That's right, first hit.
But it hit number one right off the top. Number one with a bullet. And it became, in 1970, the third and last number one hit for Bacharach David. Okay, so there's that. And covered by everybody in the dog.
By everybody, yeah.
Next, Wives and Lovers.
Oh, yeah.
By Jack Jones.
Yeah.
October 1963. Yeah, you go ahead and tell us something about Wives and Lovers.
This is okay. It's not uncommon that you hear some complaints leveled at Bacharach and David for misogyny. That some of their songs, some of their even popular songs, best-selling songs, had a certain kind of Neanderthal perspective on women. And boy, this is one of them. This is, I think even for the time, this was a song that caught some people off guard a bit. This is essentially a song about how wives, it is their responsibilities to remain, a kind of smoke show for their husbands. And just because you're married doesn't mean that, that, and it's pretty, it's not an explicit song, but the message is clear. And it is delivered, that message is delivered pretty effectively, if you will, by Jack Jones. And so whether it's Jack Jones, who has a lot of success with this song, or a couple years later, Andy Williams, Wives and Lovers fits under this category of Bacharach and David, of songs about women that are, problematic, I think.
Here,
vocalist.
I have to quote this book again because it's fairly brilliant. Its description of this. It said, for most styles of pop song, Jones is the worst kind of singer. He enunciates rather than emotes,
Yes.
reduces words to mere syllables, and hits the notes square on the head like he's going down a shopping list.
Yeah.
If male chauvinist pigs needed a pledge drive song, they needn't have looked further than this King of the Castle anthem. And Jones sounds all too happy oinking the news.
Oh, yeah.
That a house is not a home, it's a sex slave camp where a breadwinner has a moral obligation to commit adultery if his wife sees him off to work with curlers in her hair.
Yes.
In defense of Hal David, who stayed home and greeted his working wife at the door when he was starting out as a songwriter, these lyrics weren't exploiting women so much as exploiting a 60s cinematic sex romp that exploits women and men as skirt-chasing Neanderthals. And he all too perfectly captures the sleazeball allure of this otherwise forgotten film. It is another film song for the movie Wives and Lovers.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this, Steve, is that it was covered by women too, and not just a few.
Oh.
So I find that very strange.
Yikes. You've come a long way, baby. Indeed. It's okay. And again, we're going to talk about another song that's sort of in a similar vein here in a minute. But Hal David and Burt Bacharach wrote a variety of songs. I mean, they had, you could pigeonhole them, but yet you kind of couldn't. And so there's just something about them. Again, they have an ear to the ground. And it's remarkable how they can connect with the public in so many different ways, with so many different performers. This song is a little iffy. I don't think it holds up very well, but once again, it's sold records.
I find it really, really difficult to listen to.
Oh, it's cringeworthy. Oh yeah. For sure.
Okay, the last thing that we're going to talk about from the year 63 is Anyone Who Had a Heart, which is, by the way, also the title of Bacharach's autobiography.
Right.
Another Dionne Warwick song released November 63. This time it topped at number 8 on the Billboard chart, making it her first US top 10.
Yeah.
Cilla Black covered it and took it to number 1 in England. This is something that clearly rankles with Warwick.
Oh, yes.
Said, if I had sneezed in the song, she would have sneezed as well. She just covered it like note for note, every single inflection and so on was copied. That's a very famous quote. And Warwick has been very open in her dismissiveness of these British acts, most notably Cilla Black. But to Cilla Black's defense, she was a fine singer, and I think that Warwick is not. I mean, she's accurate in describing how some British acts approached Bacharach David numbers and sort of copying her vocalizations and whatnot. But Cilla Black and Dusty Springfield are two British singers who were powerful and were accomplished and were, I think, to be fair, artists in their own right. But just Warwick, I don't know if you're aware of this, but do you happen to know who Cilla Black's manager was?
Brian Epstein.
Yeah.
That's something.
He discovered her as a hat girl at one of the spots the Beatles were playing in Hamburg. And she became one of his, after the Beatles, I think his top star, right?
That's right. And in fact, her early career, she was kind of the pal gal of the Beatles, and she would appear, as an opening act in this kind of thing. And that was sort of her calling card. really wouldn't be until the mid to late 60s that she sort of kind of broke away from that. I mean, I'm a Cilla Black fan. I think she was a fine singer, if not maybe even a great singer. And so I understand what Warwick had to say. She had a bird in her saddle. I don't think it was completely sort of out of left field. There was something to it.
Okay, 1964. Walk On By. One of the great Dionne Warwick hits, released in April of that year, reached number 6 on the Billboard charts. It was also her first international hit. She did German and Italian versions.
Yes.
And this was covered by a host of singers, including Isaac Hayes.
Now, that's right. That is flat out a great version.
He does, I don't know, like a 12-minute version.
Yes, he does. I think that's on Hot Buttered Soul. I think that's right.
It is on Hot Buttered Soul. It makes up about a fourth of that album.
That's right. Yeah.
And
it's extraordinary.
They end up, Warwick and Hayes end up doing this as a duet as well.
Yeah.
A little bit later. But he added some stuff that, was clearly not coming from Hal David's pen. Things like, oh, you put the hurt on me. You socked it to me, mama. There's no dust in my eyes. It ain't smoke that's making me cry. And so on. So, typical.
There we go. So Isaac Hayes, member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Isaac Hayes, a great writer and performer and producer, but also a very unique interpreter of the work of a variety of composers. But David, Bacharach and David, he does a couple things of theirs that are just jaw-dropping, really fascinating stuff. We'll include this on the playlist. His version of Walk On By is incredible.
Okay, the next is Always Something There to Remind Me. One of my favorites. I just love that song. It was put out by Lou Johnson, released in August 1964, and made it to the Billboard chart number 49. But Sandy Shaw had a number 1 with it in England. That made it to number 52 in England. So I'm not really sure how I even came to.
I think
it wasn't.
Well, I think
really popular enough.
I think I know maybe the reason why you became familiar with it was that it was revived again in the early 1980s with a group called Naked Eyes, who had a very kind of over the top version of it that was it was an international smash. It's a fine song that has been, as you noted, Dave, interpreted by lots of people over a span of several decades.
I guarantee you, the one that I knew and loved was earlier than.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The Naked Eyes version I think is fantastic. With the big glockenspiels and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, moving along. 1965. What the World Needs Now. Now this was written for Gene Pitney, and then it was rejected by Dionne Warwick. Bacharach took it to the soul singer Timmy Euro, and she was appearing in some theater, and he took it to her dressing room, and she started to sing it, and he said to me, no, I want you to sing like this. What the world needs now. And she said, go fuck yourself.
Yeah. There we go.
Said, several weeks later, Jackie DeShannon was singing it, and it made it to the Billboard number 7. So
yeah, this is yes, it did. And so the proof is in the pudding there. It's kind of a jazz waltz. I think it's 3/4 time. It's this is, I think, on the Mount Rushmore of Bacharach David songs. I think this is also very much a kind of defining song of the era. They weren't political. they really, generally speaking, they sort of shied away from any kind of overt politics. David did in his lyrics.
Well,
But there's
it's
no
interesting. David talks about this song being the one probably that had to gestate with him longest.
Yes.
He said he started working on it like 2 years earlier, but he just couldn't bring it together somehow. And then the line, "We don't need any more mountains," and so, for some reason, that was what made it click and put everything else in place.
Well, and when you consider, and when you consider what's happening in the United States at this time, with the civil rights movement in full swing, with Vietnam starting to become, a quagmire, that there is something, and of course, in the wake of the Kennedy assassination, JFK's death,
Yeah.
it's there's something very powerful about the song, and there's something about that really. This is a kind of defining song of the 60s. I mean, it's not.
Well,
it's
it's 65, right? There's also a civil rights movement going on.
Yeah, it's huge. Yes, that's right. Exactly right. And Jackie DeShannon's delivery here is remarkable. I mean, she's a very interesting artist, a strong writer on her own.
Yes,
but she really owns the song. She really makes it hers. It's a very powerful version. This is on the Mount Rushmore.
Yes.
This is a very important song for them. Yeah.
I think Jackie DeShannon is fantastic, and she's a beautiful woman. Is still a beautiful woman, incredibly, in her old age. But there were over 100 cover versions of this, over 100, including a type of medley from L.A. DJ Tom Clay. I think you know what I'm talking about.
That's right. Yeah.
Can you say something about that?
Well. This is a kind of I guess a kind of mashup of What the World Needs Now and then Abraham, Martin and John. This was released. Help me out, Dave. This would have been
1971, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and so again, in the wake of sort of everything, in the wake of assassinations, campus unrest, Vietnam, it's a very odd record. It's stilted. It's almost a kind of spoken word thing. But it speaks to the kind of pain I think that people were in. I mean, I just think that this is when times are tough, this is a kind of song that people, gravitate toward. They lean on it in some way. And so I think that I think that Bacharach and David, this is a song that has really helped a lot of people over the years. I think it really has.
And it's interesting. In 1965, it was really just kind of a gentle appeal, love, a very flower power type of thing.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
Just two years before the Summer of Love. And in 1971, it has a definitely different feel to it. Very much a protest song, right?
Very much.
Like an in-your-face type of protest song.
Very, very much, yes.
So just in those few years, things have changed quite a bit, and this song reflects it.
Well, I have to say that, I think that's absolutely right. I can't, tell me how many documentaries I've seen of the Vietnam War, and then you'll see scenes of battle or bombing, and then you'll have in the soundtrack, What the World Needs Now is Love. It's sort of this kind of ironic soundtrack. It's a very powerful number, and it clearly, I think it's one of the most important songs they ever wrote. Okay.
Next one from 1965, What's New Pussycat by Tom Jones. Released in June. Hit the Billboard #3. Of course, this was the song for the movie What's New Pussycat, the first screenplay by Woody Allen, with Peter Sellers and just a number of basically A-list stars back in the time, including some of the most beautiful sex symbols of the year. This was also the first movie that Bacharach had been asked to score. Mm-hmm. And he really had no concept of how to go about doing that. He kind of had to feel his way along. and would have failed miserably if Angie Dickinson, his wife at the time, hadn't just been there to like change reels for him and things like that. Just, just some basic assistant shit. But he did not know how to do it. And so she was doing all this, and she did it willingly. But when it came out, basically his entire score was like thrown out by the director. And he just used various instrumentals of What's New Pussycat, the song itself, and so on, throughout the movie in different parts. And Bacharach was pissed. He really had just about wrecked his health trying to score this movie. Right. And after he saw it, he wanted his name removed. He didn't want to be associated with it at all. And Angie Dickinson said, "Don't be stupid. This is going to be a huge hit." And it was. It was the first of 4 Academy Award nominations that they received, Bacharach and David. They didn't win, but they didn't really expect to with this one. So
yeah, well, that being said, this song's atrocious. But let's just be clear. It became very much a kind of, this was the signature Tom Jones song. For all I know, Tom Jones is still singing this, warbling this someplace.
Love the song.
It is an abomination. And it is one of those songs, again, that people who sort of have some trouble with Bacharach and David in terms of how they sort of objectify women, ding, ding, ding. This is at the top of the list. So I'd love to hear your full-throated defense of What's New Pussycat.
Oh, well, I don't find it nearly as offensive as Wives and Lovers. But
few things are. That's true. There we go.
But, this is one of Tom Jones' first hits. He didn't really think that it was a song for him, but he worked together with Bacharach, and he said, he got the best performance out of me that I've ever given. So he was impressed with and yeah, and hear this sort of thing again and again from singers who have him directing their singing during the recording.
Well, I think that's fair, and I think we're going to talk about that in just a second when we talk about that Alfie. But it is interesting. Again, just when we talk about their output in the 1960s, how many different approaches they had. I mean, just the variety of songs is it's kind of astounding. I mean, not kind of astounding, it is astounding. They were remarkably prolific, and they're remarkably diverse in their output. But it's also the case, Dave, that by the mid-1960s, the film industry has certainly caught their attention, that they have, in the case of Bacharach in particular, he has become very much a kind of part of the Hollywood scene. He's a kind of Hollywood A-lister by this time. I think more so than Hal David ever was. I don't know that Hal David was ever really interested in the fast lane.
Ever could have been. They just, from personality, wrong personality type entirely, and didn't have the looks, didn't have the celebrity wife.
And so it's interesting, and you can see, I suppose, on some level, sort of the seeds of the dissolution of their partnership a little bit when Bacharach becomes a kind of personality on his own. That there's Bacharach. Bacharach would appear, guest star in variety shows and this kind of thing. He was much more public than David ever was. And it's right at this point, with his marriage with Angie Dickinson and all of this, that Bacharach becomes he really begins to sort of, I think, overshadow David as a kind of personality.
Oh yeah, definitely. That and as you say, when television specials talk about the music of Bacharach and Burt Bacharach's on there playing piano and singing his songs.
Yes.
Hal David said, what the heck? My kids were watching and said, why why isn't your name up there as well?
No, that's right. Yeah, I mean, Bacharach would be appear on these shows and he would sing his song, but actually it was their song, right? And so
It was all Bacharach David, the
yeah,
material that he was doing.
So David's kids are asking, I think, the fundamental question: where are you, Dad, in all of this? And as Bacharach's star shone brighter, David was just not as apparent. Just was kind of disappeared.
Yeah. So as you said, this was at least the beginning of tensions.
Yes.
That would lead to the breakup. Probably we're starting around this point. So we're in 1966. One of the all-time great songs, one of Bacharach's favorite songs too, and one of his favorite lyrics of David's.
Yes.
Is Alfie.
Yeah.
What's it all about, Alfie?
What's it all?
Again, for a movie, right, with Michael Caine. And the producer director wanted Cilla Black to sing the song. They asked her to do it. She wasn't wild about the idea.
Right.
She's like, well, Alfie, that's a dog's name. So she just decided she would give up. I'll do it under certain conditions. Bacharach has to come to England for the production. Okay. He said yes. Oh, well, he also has to direct.
Yes.
He has to conduct the session. Okay. He also has to play piano.
Yes.
For the record. Fine. So he agreed to every one of these, and she thought at some point I would just stop. No, okay, that's a bridge too far. But it didn't. So she just was kind of forced to say, well, I guess I'll do it then, And it was a session in the same studio where the Beatles had been producing their hits with George Martin as producer. And he put her through the ringer.
Yes.
There were like 29, 30 attempts at this. And each time he'd say, I'd just like to, let's try that again. Let's, he said at some point, George Martin asked, Burt, what exactly is it that you're trying to get? And he said, just that bit of magic. So they did a number of, and it's a difficult song because it starts off rather low and soft. And at the end, it's very high, very dramatic. And Cilla Black said, I had to basically pull it out of my boots.
Yep. Yeah, it's almost 2 octaves. And it is, in that particular session, they filmed some of it. We'll include that on the playlist with Bacharach in the studio at the piano, conducting, as well as then instructing her. It's really, you can feel the energy, you can feel the strain. It's really something. It's a fascinating little clip that we'll include. But this is a very powerful song that a number of people had a go at and had some success with, right? So
also over 100 covers. Dionne Warwick, of course, covered it.
Yeah, that's right.
Reached 42nd on the charts for her. It was the second Oscar nomination for him. Lost to Born Free. A friend of his that was watching the Oscars said that when Born Free was read as the winner of that nomination, he saw Burt, shit, just saw him saying it. He was on camera and
I wanted to win.
Not an easy loser. So
that I think the most one of the most unusual versions of this that actually charted on the adult contemporary charts was from Stevie Wonder. And Stevie Wonder
with the harmonica, right?
With the harmonica. And so this is put out on Gordy's kind of personal label, the Gordy label. And this is an album, part of an album of harmonica music. And Stevie Wonder then jumbled the letters of his name.
Right.
Yvette's Red Now. But this is another take on Alfie. It's a very compelling song. It's like you're suggesting, Dave, it's a kind of odd song. It's a song that starts low and somber, then it has kind of an explosive finish. It's a very difficult song to sing. And Warwick and Cilla Black and a number of others, it's a kind of tour de force. If you can pull this off, you can sing just about anything. But this particular version's on harmonica.
Anyway, just an interesting aside. Although it was the producer and director of the movie that wanted Cilla Black, the studio actually had Cher sing the song that was included in the movie in the end.
Yeah, it's
so and that was produced by Sonny and
it's
but I still think the Cilla Black version, after maybe Dionne Warwick, is the most popular and well known.
Oh, I think so too. It's the Cher story, the Cher anecdote. It's an interesting one. She's really had a remarkable career. I mean, it's just funny where you'll find Cher sort of popping up in this era. Again, you think about Cher being sort of this icon, and she clearly is, but she has had this incredibly lengthy and productive career, and even had part of the Alfie story of all things.
Yeah. And it's funny that Mike Myers quotes Cilla Black's after that session saying, I could have fucking killed him, but he was so fucking beautiful. She also credits Burt Bacharach with getting her best possible performance out of her. So, maybe it takes 29, 30 takes.
Maybe it does. Yeah, maybe it does.
All right, 1967. One Less Bell to Answer by Keely Smith. By whom?
Well, by who? Yeah, so I don't have Keely Smith.
It was released in the spring of the year. It didn't chart.
No, it didn't.
Then it became a hit 3 years later, or 3.5 years later, November 1970. The Fifth Dimensions version was released. And it premiered on the TV series It Takes a Thief with Robert Wagner.
Oh, yes.
Purportedly showing the recording session of this song with producer Bones Howe.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
so
well
it's
connected.
Actually pretty, and that's definitely on our playlist. You'll definitely want to check that out.
Absolutely. It's I don't have it. I mean, we should just a shout out to Keely Smith, who had a lengthy career as the vocalist for Louis Prima, a partner, actually married Louis Prima, and for many, many years was his duet partner and kind of comic foil. But the Fifth Dimension is, this is the definitive version, Marilyn McCoo.
Yes.
But again, this is, when you think about Bacharach and David songs and the sophistication, this is a very sophisticated, it's a very complex song. There's a certain kind of melancholy here that is palpable. And again, it does, on the face of it, it's like a pop song, but yes, a pop song, a popular pop song, a pop song that had legs, has legs. I mean, it's still considered, an important song. And I just would, again, a quick shout out to the Fifth Dimension, who's undergoing a bit of a reassessment here in the 21st century. They were a very interesting group.
They were
out of Southern California. They had a very kind of refined taste, and this is one of their high water marks for sure.
Interestingly, just the title "One Less Bell to Answer" is attributed to Angie Dickinson. they were at some party at their place, and she asked the first guests to have arrived to let people in who came later. She said, "There'll be one less bell to answer for me."
There we go.
And then so Hal David picked up on that.
It's
Rest is
interesting.
history.
What's just history? It is interesting what an important role Angie Dickinson played in all of this. She was a very important part of Bacharach's life, but she, in her own way, I think, played a kind of interesting and I think significant role in the partnership of Bacharach and David. And she's Angie Dickinson is always a part of these stories, the development of songs, this kind of thing. That there she is again, and she's a very significant player. Right, but we would agree though. If you're talking about 1967, this is Bacharach and David sort of at their peak. They are really riding high on the charts. They're in film. The Bacharach is on television. It's they are they're songwriters. They're really at the peak of their output and also their fame.
Right, and the next bit here is Casino Royale.
Yeah.
An instrumental for the movie of the same title by no one other than Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, released in April 1967. Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass could have played the Campbell's Soup commercial and it would have hit the top 20. They were selling more records in 1967 than anyone else other than the Beatles and the Monkees. Huge. And so, it's kind of a no-brainer. If one of your friends is Herb Alpert, say, "Hey, why don't you do this for me?" It reached the Billboard 27. So
yeah, it also, I think, speaks to the small world that LA was even in the 60s regarding popular music, that people who were in the studio together would be at the same parties, would be at the same tennis clubs. They had, connections that were both professional and social. And so there was, I guess there's a kind of incestuous quality to all this, but it's no accident the same people are working together. They're producing, each other's albums, this kind of thing. You have this session work. Everything is happening in LA, right? It was clear, right, that Bacharach and David, they started, in traditional Brill Building, New York, but the action at this point in popular music is in Southern California. It's in Los Angeles, and they're really, particularly Bacharach, really at the heart of it, the heartbeat of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the really big Bacharach David hits, "I Say a Little Prayer," was released in October 67 with who else? Dionne Warwick. Hit the Billboard number 4. And interestingly, Bacharach wasn't really very pleased with that version of it because he felt it was a little bit rushed, just a little bit too, we don't have to get through this so fast. And some of the other versions of it, like Aretha Franklin's, were slower.
Yeah, I have to.
And it was extensively covered, right?
It was extensively covered. It's Warwick, of course, I think hits the charts first with it. But I think most people would agree that a few months later, when Aretha Franklin's version was released on Atlantic, that it became a kind of definitive version of it. As you're suggesting, it slowed it down a little bit. It's a little bit rougher. And like with everything Franklin did, she just, again, kind of made it her own. But this is Say a Little Prayer.
And she did that with a number of
oh my God, that's right. If anything, Aretha Franklin is underrated. But it's so many people. So it's fascinating in this era, right, that so many fine singers are gravitating toward the works of Bacharach and David because they know that it's quality. They know that they'll be, that it'll be challenging, but they also know that there's an audience for it, right? That if they're effective, if they deliver an effective vocal, that this record has a great chance of selling. And so there's this kind of real dynamic action that surrounds everything that Bacharach and David are producing. And great singers are really gravitating toward these songs.
Yeah,
what a part
and
of it.
if you can do even like 2 or 3 of theirs, then you're good for a medley on any variety show.
That's for sure. No, that's absolutely true.
Right.
The variety show, which was the staple of American network television in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Yeah, and then within every variety show there would be a hit medley of, and oftentimes that medley would include or be of, Bacharach David songs.
Yeah,
that's absolutely right.
Interestingly, I have always liked this song, but it never occurred to me Hal David wrote this with the Vietnam War in the back of his mind.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
And I say a little prayer because you're over there in harm's way. So every chance I get during the day, I say a little prayer for you, because I don't know what life would be like to live without. So
yes, I mean,
and that gives it a certain poignancy for me.
It certainly does. It certainly does. But I have to say that I don't know that story was terribly well known. I don't know that there was really any kind of association, political association or association with Vietnam when this song was popular. In fact, I know there wasn't.
I've been listening to this for decades, and until I was doing the research for this, it never occurred to me that there was that connection.
Which speaks to one of the things that does make them unusual, particularly, I guess, David, is the relative absence of the politics in the lyrics. This is, was there ever a more political era where everything was up for grabs than the late 1960s? My God, the country was coming apart at the seams, and certainly popular music was a forum where these ideas were bandied about. It was protest songs, political songs sold records. And so it wouldn't be an anathema to, have a political statement in a popular song, but it's just really interesting that David largely kind of shied away from that, any kind of overt political statement. Just even in an era where that kind of thing would have almost been expected, just didn't do it.
Just one more thing about this song before we move on. The B-side from this was a theme from Valley of the Dolls, which was not a Bacharach David song.
Yeah.
But that went to number 2. It was actually more popular than I Say a Little Prayer. So it was in the end actually a double A side, and became the first gold record for Dionne Warwick.
That's that's kind of
67. It's her.
That's kind of staggering. No, it's kind of stunning. That's the Valley of Dolls. That is a curious song in a even stranger movie. I've never read. It's a Jacqueline Suzanne novel, I believe. But
right.
Very much
read that. Wow. I don't know why.
Oh my Lord. Well, yeah. Very much of its time, I guess. But that you say 67 gold record for Dionne Warwick. That would seem like, I don't know, like 4 years too late or something.
Yeah. Right.
There you go. Yeah.
Incredible. We have another moment like that coming up here, but the next song we want to talk about is "Do You Know the Way to San Jose?"
This is
also Dionne Warwick, released April 1968, made it into the Billboard Top 10. And Hal David was stationed in San Jose while he was in the Navy, and he says sometimes I like to write lyrics against the grain, because this is a little uplifting, light, fun type of music, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually about somebody, kind of a bummed out sort of guy. He's been trying to make it in Hollywood, and no one wants to know about him. So
that's right.
He's going back to San Jose, which is his home, because clearly that's where he has a chance of being happy.
I mean, yeah, and for those of us, those who are unfamiliar with the geography of California, San Jose is it's Northern California. It's a long way from LA, and so it basically, right, you are, you're getting out, right? You're giving up on the dream or something. Yeah,
right. And originally, Dionne Warwick kind of balked at this. He said, "Why San Jose?" But she visited the city. She said, "quote It's a beautiful little city. I was made an honorary citizen. I'm accused of putting it on the map and overpopulating it."
well, I have to, yeah, it's funny I think for many of us, that was our first introduction to San Jose, when you'd hear the song and you'd like run to the atlas or something like San Jose. Is that a real city?
I thought it was in Arizona.
It's it's a jaunty little number. It's one of those songs that I think everybody knows at least a few words to, knows the chorus, can whistle, that kind of thing. Bacharach famously talked about that one of the pieces of advice he got as a young composer was that you should never apologize for writing a piece of music that people can kind of hum along to. That there are important pieces of music, but there are also pieces of music that are popular, that are memorable. And this is a medley melody that is, it's bouncy. It's a kind of light song in a way, but it's also, it's an earworm. You can't get rid of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. By the way, this was Dionne Warwick's first Grammy for this song. And it was the last time that she would record at Bell Studios on West 54th. The last 3 years that she was with Spectors, she would record at Phil Ramone's studio. So kind of an end of an era there.
For sure, yeah.
The next one's interesting. This guy's in love with you. Originally, this girl's in love with you. But Herb Alpert was looking to do a television special with the Tijuana Brass, and wanted to sing some type of ballad to his wife, and asked Bacharach and David, "You guys have something, laying around in a drawer somewhere that deserves another look, that deserves a shot at the light of day?" And they gave him this, which had been lying around in a drawer for a while. But Herb Alpert took it and sang it. Herb Alpert, who otherwise only ever played trumpet, he sang this to his wife for this thing. They weren't even planning to release it as a single, but the demand,
that's exactly right,
was just incredible.
That's it. That people went crazy when they heard it on that show. They went crazy.
It's a very appealing little song, and he does a very nice job with it.
Sure, yeah.
It went to number one. It was the first number one for A&M Records, which is incredible considering that they had one of the pop powerhouses of the 60s working in their stable. Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass had never had a number one until Herb Alpert sang. Is also the first number one for Bacharach and David. It's 1968. It's their first number one hit. I'm sorry. It was released in May 1968 and released as a single, as I said, to respond to the demand for it. People just wanted to have it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose had Alpert had his way, it would have never been released. I think he just needed this song, as you suggest, just to kind of fill a kind of slot in the show, right?
Yeah.
That there was this sort of and with no, I mean, it's fascinating that he was so laissez-faire about the whole thing, but it really changed Albert's career. It changed A&M Records, and as you're suggesting, it was an enormous thing for both Bacharach and David. It's really
it's really interesting when you consider how Bacharach usually produces his stuff. Herb Alpert went in there and to the studio, sang a demo, and he said, "Well, what do you guys think?" I said, "Okay, perfect." Well, yeah, So are we ready to do it? No, we'll take that. It was the first take.
First take.
He did one take of it. That was it.
Not a
So-
singer. Not a singer.
Not
Just
a singer.
Not a singer.
He nailed it. So
Nailed it.
incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible.
The song was also a hit for Dionne Warwick, Aretha Franklin, B.J. Thomas, so on and so forth. Also covered by a lot of people.
Again, it's one of those songs that I think everybody knows at least a part of. It is everything that surrounds the song is so peculiar that it almost seems like fiction in a way. But yeah, this was a big song where a lot of people changed lives without question.
In 1968, Bacharach and David were asked to sign on to a project for Broadway. Neil Simon had written a musical, or what was supposed to be a musical or become a musical, based on the film The Apartment. And the musical was called Promises, Promises. And so they got Bacharach and David on to write the songs that would make it a musical. After the first performance, the opening night in Boston, which is like a pre-Broadway test run, right? David Merrick, the director, came back and was just threatening everyone involved. Boy, this is not going to run. This is not going to do it. If you think this is not Broadway material, I need to have another song in the second act. And if it's not a showstopper, we can just leave it here.
Yeah.
Well, Burt Bacharach was in the initial throes of pneumonia when he was getting bawled out for this.
Yeah.
And had to produce a showstopper for the second act for this musical in like 3 days.
Yeah, basically, right.
So he was writing the music to this song in the hospital, and the lyrics belong to some of Hal David's most clever lyrics, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
But what do you get when you kiss a girl? You get enough germs to catch pneumonia. So maybe that was inspired. After you do, she'll never phone you. I love the song. Have always thought it was really clever. It was originally sang by Jerry Orbach of Law and Order fame, and Jill O'Hara, released on the soundtrack December 1968. Tom Jones had a number 6 hit with it, released in August 1969.
This is again, this is one of those songs that I think you're suggesting everybody knows at least a part of. A clever lyric, maybe a bit too on the nose for some, but it's this is, when you talk about the Bacharach David kind of style, there's something about this song capturing a sense, a feeling that it's just perfect. It's just perfect. And the Warwick performance in particular is it's just spot on. This is one of her best moments on record. It's just
released in January 1970. Also hit the Billboard number 6. Interestingly, this soundtrack also produced 2 other top 20 hits. So Promises was a hot property.
It was. It was a hot property, Dave. It also, I think briefly, it also speaks to their ambition. Say what you will about some of the songs that they crafted. They were always pushing themselves, and they were always looking for new challenges. And why not Broadway? In fact, it makes what seems odd in a way is that they didn't have more opportunities dealing with Broadway. That if you think about it, traditionally in American popular music, songwriting duos, they wrote for the musical theater, right? And you could very much imagine a Bacharach David tandem, focusing in on
Yes.
Broadway.
Yeah, because when you talk about some of the great songwriting teams of the 20th century, you're often talking about Broadway
Absolutely.
songwriting teams, right?
That's right.
Rodgers and Hammerstein and
Lerner and Lowe, all this, right? Rodgers and
Yes.
Hart, all that, right? And so, so you would think that why not Bacharach and David? And interestingly, I think they thought that themselves, right? That wasn't a foreign concept to them at all. And it didn't really quite materialize, but they gave it a go.
right. Well, and their one go at it was tremendously successful. So
Yeah, fair point. That's right.
maybe they could have gone more in that direction and stayed away from movies a little bit. Although in 1969,
Yeah, this is it, right?
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was produced, and they came to Bacharach and David because they thought, there are a few scenes in this movie that could use a score, could use a song. And the one scene that was establishing some sort of connection between Butch and the school teacher character from,
I'm not going to be able to help you. It's Catherine Ross. I
Catherine
don't
Ross.
know.
the beautiful and charming Catherine Ross. This whole bicycle scene, which is just almost lyrical in itself.
That's right.
And originally they had just as a kind of a placeholder, Simon and Garfunkel's "Feeling Groovy" playing over that. But Bacharach came in, and this was one of the times he always has like little nonsense phrases to mark where the lyrics should be, right? For himself when he was writing the music. And one of the phrases that kept coming up in his head again and again was "Raindrops keep falling on my head."
Yeah.
And it's just repeating it again and again. But Hal David took that, and because it was kind of like Butch's theme song, right? It kind of describes his life.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a hard life, but I'm not going to get anywhere by complaining. So it was originally Bacharach composed it originally with Bob Dylan in mind. He thought that Bob Dylan's phrasing would be perfect for the song.
Oh my God.
But the studio wanted Ray Stevens or Eddie Arnold. I think Eddie Arnold would have killed it. I think
Eddie Arnold. Yes, Eddie Arnold.
Right?
But yes, Ray Stevens.
Ray Stevens. No, I don't get that. But I think
Look at that. Eddie Arnold. Yeah, sure.
In the end, they got B.J. Thomas.
Yes.
And he had laryngitis when recording the movie version. And
Unbelievable.
His doctor said, you just need to stop talking for the next 2 weeks. Oh, I can't have to sing this. Well, okay, here's some lozenges. Suck them for all you're worth. And so he sang the version that was in the movie, re-recorded it a couple of weeks later. Burt Bacharach had two versions of the song, kind of a comfortable, laid-back version and more upbeat, up-tempo type thing. And after they had started printing the 45s, he said, "Stop, wait, I know what I want to do." He started off with the comfortable version, kicked in the up-tempo version in the middle, and that was the single that they released then.
It's
and it made number one, which was their second number one song. And the third, of course, as we said before, was "Close to You." And
that's right.
They had these two guys only had 3 number one hits. It's incredible. It's mind-blowing.
It is mind-blowing. But of course, then they put dozens and dozens and dozens of songs in the top 20 and all of that. But in terms of climbing the getting to the apex of the chart, right? It happened very rarely. This is very much a song of the late 60s. It's very much, it's a perfect song for the film. I mean, there's so much that's sort of charming and memorable about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. There's the production, it's incredible. And this song fits so well. I mean, Bacharach and David really, by this point, had, they understood movies. They understood how to fit their work into a film. They were remarkable at it. I mean, they really were remarkable at it. And it's, it's sort of odd that it becomes their undoing, but this is a perfect song for the film. No
I was
question.
going to say, can you describe that in any more glowing terms? Because what's coming next is just like the antithesis of what you're.
No, it really is. It's the odd thing about Bacharach and David is really, I think, how it comes apart. We have only really skimmed the surface of their
Absolutely
album.
right.
And you could spend hours and hours and hours just exploring the depths of their work, and really some of the most challenging and compelling pop of the 1960s. But what we'd like to do now is just sort of talk about how this all comes unraveled,
crashing down. Yeah.
So go ahead. So let's take us. So
okay. Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head was their 4th Oscar nomination. It's the only Oscar win for Bacharach and David. And they were on Olympia, right? They had
absolutely
made it. And they kind of just coasted the next few years, just playing to adoring audiences, or especially Bacharach. And he said, you can tell people like my music because they'll listen to it even when I play it.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Which is what was happening, right? Because he had all sorts of engagements. But come 1973, Paramount has a huge project that's just going to blow box office records. Lost Horizons, a musical version of Shangri-La.
Yeah.
And they need writers to write the music.
That's right.
Which Bacharach and David did to the best of their abilities.
Yeah.
The movie bombed really bad.
Yeah, it did.
More than just one sense, because it was a ticking time bomb for the partnership.
That's right.
As well.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. I think everybody had a sense, even in the earliest moments of production, that this version of Lost Horizon was going to be, it's doomed. And so there was a palpable sense of panic amongst director, actors, everybody at the studio, and including Bacharach. So Bacharach found himself in a situation where he was writing basically the music for almost the entire film, right? If it's a musical, then there is music at almost every moment that the film's on the screen. And so he is just buried. He's buried alive in work.
Hal David had dashed off the lyrics to the songs, which took a couple months, but then he was done, right? And Bacharach continued plowing through it.
Yeah.
With ever increasing doubts about it ever bringing anything in terms of monetary rewards, compensation.
That's right.
So at some point, he calls Hal David, who is vacationing with his family in Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
And says, look, we originally had a deal where we were going to split 5% of the earnings on this movie, a straight split, but I want 3%. He just asking for an extra 0.5%, 3%. I get 3 and you get 2. I'm just carrying the bulk of the burden, right? And Hal David basically told him to go fuck himself. And that was basically the end.
That was it.
Partnership.
That was it. Okay.
Which was very bad because Dionne Warwick had recently switched from Scepter to Columbia, had essentially taken her songwriters with her, songwriters that all of a sudden weren't going to be writing any songs.
Exactly. Right.
So Columbia said, "What the hell?" And Dionne said, "What the hell, guys?
Yep.
You know, the company is coming at me now. I can't do anything about it." So she ended up having to sue them.
Yes.
For like $5 million or something like that. It's just, but it was a bad thing, and an incredibly fruitful collaboration between these three people just came crashing down. And they didn't even talk to each other for like nearly 10 years.
It's extraordinary. Again, there was it was over really literally nothing, because the movie didn't make anything. I think everybody knew it was going to make anything. It lost
money.
Yeah.
It almost ruined Paramount Studios.
Blew up, almost blew the studio. It's also the case that Bacharach understood the predicament that he was in regarding Warwick, and he did it anyway. So he knew he was going to be, he knew he was going to get sued. He knew he was going to really turn his life upside down, and he did it anyway. And so Bacharach has been very open. He talks about this explicitly in his autobiography, that it really was his fault. He owns it, that it was a mistake. It was a very rash decision. And if he could do it over again, he wouldn't probably do it that way.
And this is the thing that in the end makes Burt Bacharach, for me, in spite of everything, a likable figure.
Okay.
Because he's very open about his foibles. He admits it when he was wrong about things. He doesn't try to paint a glamorous picture of himself as the shining artist. He doesn't do that, and I think his resisting what has to be certainly a temptation to do that makes him likable for me.
Well, many share your opinion. Many share your opinion about Bacharach and his likability. I do think, though, that all good things come to an end, and it was likely, again, that this creative partnership, it certainly couldn't last forever. Maybe it was, in fact, sort of, fated just to end the way it did in the early 1970s. But I guess there's always this kind of what if. The thing about it, though, that is really kind of mystifying is the personal animosity, and the fact that they were very much linked at the hip. I mean, their families were close, the whole thing, and that all just came apart. And as you're suggesting, Dave, they didn't communicate for years and years and years, and really, frankly, never really that was never really repaired. Maybe at the very end of David's life, but it's a fascinating kind of glimpse into the kind of creative process that glows and burns so brightly, and then it's done, and both of them walked away.
There was a brief reunion in 1989. They wrote a couple songs together. That didn't do much of anything. Talked about we could get back into this, but never really did. There was no follow up on that.
That's right.
So for all practical purposes, the real profitable collaboration took place in the 60s,
I think that's right.
And pretty much ended there.
I think that's fair.
But what a decade for these guys.
No question.
And look, Warwick's recordings sold over 12 million copies, 38 singles making the charts, 22 of them in the top 40. she would eventually have more hits during her career than any other female vocalist except Aretha Franklin.
Yeah.
So clearly she benefited very,
No,
very
absolutely.
much from
Absolutely.
her association with her collaboration with these guys.
And again, she's been very open about this. She's been very open to, and you know, she's been, the Lost Horizon debacle aside, she's been very upfront about the gratitude she feels to that association with Bacharach and David. It was a remarkable pairing. You know, it's a really remarkable pairing, and they took popular music in very interesting directions. Again, in a decade that was very compelling in terms of what was happening in popular music really around the world. The Bacharach David material is worthy of a close look. I mean, it just a close listen. There's something there that's strong and that is lasting.
Oh, absolutely. And I think most of the songs that we talked about this time around are songs that I still can put on anytime and listen to and just enjoy listening to. They've held up incredibly well. So yeah,
absolutely.
just an incredibly talented group. And again, we see this sort of thing of circumstances bringing people together who just need to be, and just create something magical.
That's right.
With their symbiosis. And so
with that, we have another edition of Behind the Curtain. And so always fun to talk about these individuals who we may know a little about or may not know anything about, but who were extraordinarily important in building the foundation of popular music in the United States and really around the world. So Dave has some final thoughts here as we wrap it up.
Sure. If you enjoyed our Behind the Curtain episode with Bacharach and David, listen to some more stuff that we have. You can see other videos from behind the scenes right here. The playlist is right here, and you can subscribe to Stephen Daves right here.
There we go. And don't forget, again, Stephen Daves on Twitter, Stephen Daves1 on Twitter. And we'll also include, of course, then a playlist and a reading list so that you can learn more and listen to the songs that we've been talking about, including Sad Sack. Your life is not complete until you've actually heard Jerry Lewis.
You can live without Jerry. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.